Hi everyone, it's Jessica Dybzinski and it is Mystery Envelope Challenge time for November 2023. This month I sent the envelope out to all of my friends, and my thought was that I would keep it really more about the rules rather than about the pieces that are sent in the envelope. So I was inspired by that old wedding saying for brides: something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. So those are the things that need to be included in everyone's projects. And as far as something borrowed, I was thinking you could be inspired by a post from Pinterest or somebody else's, project, or anything, as long as it fits within those parameters. That was the idea. Now, I didn't want to send an empty envelope because that just felt strange. So I did include a slimline envelope base, card base, and then a couple of die cut pieces from just plain white daisy. I'm not sure if I'm going to actually use any of these pieces in my project today. And I did say in the rules that was fine, that they were just there to make sure it wasn't an empty envelope. But this is what I thought that I would do. I reached into my closet and just grabbed the first old idea book from close to my heart that I could find. And as soon as I pulled this one out, I was like, oh, I have always loved this layout on the cover page. Now, this particular catalog is from 2009. It is really old, but I'm pointing out here just some of my things that I really love about this layout. I think that all of the little details on there are so beautiful. And even if you go in a couple of pages, there are a few close-ups, and I really think that I'm going to use this as my something borrowed, and I am going to recreate this layout for my daughter's 5x7 school photo. It looks to me like that's the size of the picture in the layout that they have used. Now, as far as something new, I do have 2 new products that I bought and haven't used yet, so I pulled them. I'm not sure, maybe I'll use them, maybe not. I know that embossing folder is not exactly new, but it is new to me. And then for my something old and my something blue, I pulled this piece of really pretty mint paper from an old collection from 2016 called Happy Times. And my favorite shade of blue is anything that's got like that turquoise hint to it. So I think I'm going to use that as this pattern piece here that goes behind the photo. And then I am going to build my page on a piece of Harbor cardstock. So here's that Happy Times paper I pulled as something old. And then another something old, I was looking at my daughter's dress, and she's got some like purples and oranges and things like that in her outfit. And the Sawyer collection, which is from a few years ago, I think that maybe I can use some papers from there for that pattern strip that goes across the top. And so I'm definitely going to have a lot of old and definitely some borrowed. Okay, so I'm trying to recreate. So a little trick for you, if ever you're looking at something, it's a 12 by 12 layout. So if you just kind of start measuring, what's the halfway point? Well, that would be about 6 inches, and then you could go halfway from there is 1.5 inches. And that's pretty much what I did. I just took a little piece of washi tape and marked on my ruler where I had figured out 1.5 inches were on the picture of the layout. And then I used that just to kind of do my own little measuring. And I figured out that that pattern piece of paper needed to be 9 inches. And then I just cut it down to 11 3/4. Now, another thing that I really love about going through my old catalogs is I forget sometimes about how much good stuff is in there. And there are a bunch of like little just crafting tips that they kind of teach over on the side of the page. And one of them had to do with using your corner rounder to make like a scalloped border on your paper. And so that tip talked about kind of pulling that little guard off and then just overlapping the circle punches a little bit to make that scallop. My first attempt did not go so well. I think I overlapped my circle punches a little bit too close together because then it looked strange. So I just trimmed that little bit off, and then I started over, and I was much more successful the second time around. I made sure to barely overlap that little corner edge of that scallop, and it looked a whole lot better. So there you go. Something I wouldn't have thought of doing had I not pulled out that old catalog. Okay, so in the inspiration layout, it does have a piece of the pattern paper kind of folded up so that you could see the back side, which is also very pretty. But I didn't want the back side of this mint pattern paper because it does not go with my layout at all. So I've just cut a little piece of that mulberry pattern from the Sawyer collection, and I've glued it to that corner so that way, no one but me and, everybody who's watching this will know that that's not actually the back side of that pattern paper, but I'll go ahead and fold that up. And then I did cut that other piece of Sawyer pattern paper to 3 by 12 inches. Okay, it's starting to come together. I really love working off of an inspiration like this because I feel like a lot of the thinking and the ideas are already done and I can just kind of go to town mimicking it. And it was a lot of fun and I really loved how this one came out. So for my title, I'm going to say the 3rd grade, and I did use my Cricut to cut out those letters for the word grade. And I used mulberry cardstock. Now, Close to My Heart's cardstock is two-toned, and so I accidentally, when I was gluing my pieces of cardstock together because I wanted to have some dimension to my letters, I accidentally glued one of my letter D's on the wrong way, so then I ended up having to cut it again. So these letters are 4 pieces of cardstock thick, just so I could cover up that wrong shade of mulberry. Then I also went digging into my stash. One of my favorite thin cut sets is the Fancy Borders, and I just used this little like cloud scallop thin cut to cut some mint cardstock, and I'm going to layer that behind that pattern piece of paper. And here they have, it looks like some rickrack or ribbon, and it's really pretty, but I just went with that. And then I also saw that on their layout, they had stamped a little decorative something over the edge of the letters for the word blue. And so I went again digging through my stash. This was a real stash buster for me. I pulled out the stamp set called, what was it? Something about a note. My Type of Note is the name of the set. And it's got this fun little strip of typewriter stuff and letters. And I'm just going to stamp across the very edge of all of the word grade, just to kind of bring that in. And so that's just like one thing that was really fun for me is that by looking at this old catalog and, kind of really looking at some of the details in the artwork that they had provided, I just got like so many ideas of how I could use things that I hadn't used in a really long time. And so I think it's just so much fun when you can get into your stash and, get the things that get some use out of it. It's like you buy it for a reason. You might as well use it, right? I forgot to leave myself a little bit of space without some adhesive behind that pattern paper. So my little paper crafting tool to the rescue there. I'm going to hold it up so I can slide this little die cut piece behind it. And then T-square ruler to the rescue here, not only to make sure that my paper goes on straight, but because that die cut piece has all of those scallops in there, I was like, oh gosh, how am I going to make sure that this is like going to look okay? And I was like, okay, this piece here, if I just make sure that the biggest top bump on that scallop is at the same point on both sides, then I guess we'll call that straight. But I know my picture is going to cover a lot of it. Okay, I'm going to flip over that bottom corner there. I put a piece of double-sided adhesive just to help hold it in place while I kind of mess with it. I'm going to give it a little gentle crease, but not really like pushing it down. I want it to have some of that dimension there. And then just to make sure that it really doesn't ever pop up while it's sitting in my scrapbook, again, went into my stash and found these old embellishments. These are just some old, there's brads in there and I don't know, just like a lot of really fun things. And I think actually some of them are used on that original layout that I'm using as an inspiration. I definitely recognized a few of the pieces and I thought how cool to use them on my layout as well. So I haven't used a brad in forever, but I'm going to poke one through this corner to make sure that it holds that corner down and the adhesive won't kind of pop up over time in my scrapbook. So all right, putting some brads in. I'm going to use some more of those brads later as embellishments, but I'll put like a little bit of adhesive here and just kind of make sure I've got those corners in really well now that I know where that fold goes. Okay, so next I am going to just kind of lay stuff out before I start gluing it down and make sure that I am happy with all of the things. I'm going to put my photo here. I don't know about you guys, but I end up with quite the collection of school photos and I always have good intentions to scrapbook them and then they're just kind of an awkward size that I never really get around to them. So I've been trying to work my way through them in these last few months. I will link to another video down below of one that I did for my son. Now is something new, because I was like so into stash busting, I kind of forgot about the something new part of the rules. I did use the Dainty Script stamp set, which I recently got and haven't used very often. And then I also used the Dimensional Storytelling, which is a Reward Your Way stamp set, which is also kind of new to me. And I used that to stamp the 3rd. And then I did do another old one from the Doodled Borders, which was an old stamp of the month, just to kind of add a little detail over to the left-hand side of the photo. Okay, I have stacked up this heart with some Harbor cardstock. It's got a couple of layers to it, and I'm using my sanding tool, which is a little disc attached to the end of my foam tool there, to pull the color off of the edges of it and kind of give it a nice distressed look. I did the same thing around the base paper that my layout is built upon. And I like the way that looks. So I'll go ahead and start gluing some things down here. I won't make you watch me do all of it, but I just wanted to kind of show you the general idea. Lots of dimension going on here. I am going to put a little bit of thin 3D foam tape behind the rest of that little banner, just because that heart has so much dimension to it. Okay, and then I went digging for some buttons, and I'm going to use a couple more of those white brads, plus this other little white, it's like a little mini doily that came from that same package of embellishments. And I'm going to stitch all of those on to my layout. Those are so fun. I used some of that mulberry color in the thread on some of the white buttons, and I put a couple up here in the top left too, because it just felt like a little heavy in that bottom right corner. And I'm almost done. My last thing is I'm going back to that inspiration layout. It looked like some white heat embossing down the side of that pattern paper. But at this point, I don't really want to mess with that, because that would be a mess. And so I have just pulled out my white gel pen, and I'm going to get the same effect much easier and much cleaner too. So I'll put a couple of dots going up the side, and then I added a few details to that Harbor colored heart. And that's going to be pretty much it. I've stamped some journaling lines here so I can kind of add the details about the year and the teacher and all of that. I didn't use those new things that I thought I was going to use, and I didn't use any of the parts from my envelope that I sent out, but that's okay. I think I've covered it. Like I said, for me, the blue was that turquoise. I've used the new in some of those stamp sets, lots and lots of old and stamps and embellishments and papers, and oh my goodness, something borrowed from that old catalog from 2009, and what am I missing? I think that's it. Something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching. I can't wait to see what all of my friends have made using these same parameters. All of our videos are going live today. I will leave links in the description box down below so that you can see how they interpreted this month's mystery envelope. And I will also leave links to anything that does happen to be available, although, like I said, lots of fun doing some stash busting on this one. Thank you guys so much for being here with me today. Have an awesome day and happy crafting. See you next time. Bye.